Hello guys, we are live from both England, in the United Kingdom, and also from the US. We've got here Rob Goodwin, myself, Jonathan from Carnivore Muscle. We're going to be talking today a bit about our mixed experiences on a carnivore and or carb cyclical sort of approach. We've both done it both ways. We've come from a unique perspective, both enhanced and natural bodybuilding in our past. We're going to be here to answer any questions that you may not have. Feel free to chuck in whatever you want in the chat. Rob's free to sort of intervene and say whatever he wants to say. But I thought we might be sort of if we just start off and say what we've done this year, our bodybuilding, how our approaches might have changed since the past, perhaps. Where we're at now in terms of what we think was most optimal, like what the benefits, pros and cons, and that sort of thing. So, Rob, if you want to go ahead.
Yeah, it's great to be here. I was super excited when we sort of reconnected in the Facebook group. It was an interesting renewal when you posted some stage shots of yourself, and of course they were fantastic, and I got the notification, was checking that out, and it was super impressed, and it was great to see you in there. And then immediately we had to start fishing out some of the negative comments that are always inevitable. But at any rate, a little bit of negativity in the group led to you and I reconnecting again. And it's been some time, and super excited to be doing this, super excited to be reconnected. And I think it's important that we can show people, because of some negativity that's been coming across of me just changing dietary approaches in order to optimize a goal. And you wouldn't think that'd be a big deal, but there are elements of any online community that see the need to attack that for whatever reason. And I thought, wouldn't it be great if Jonathan and I could sort of collaborate together, sort of under the umbrella of just being bodybuilders and athletes, and sorting out the negativity and making people understand that, however you choose to consume nutrition through your face, if it is working for you and you're achieving benefit from it and you're reaching a certain level of health, it's helping you accomplish your goals, then that's all that really matters. And at the end of the day, just because there are nuances in the way that we consume food to achieve a goal, we can unite under that banner of bodybuilding and fitness and maybe do some good in the world and maybe detract a little bit from some of the negativity and the trolling that's going on out in the space. And I just think it's really refreshing, and you don't see a lot of it. And I think it's cool that we're doing this, man.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, like you've kind of alluded to before, like in our chats, like there's more than one way to skin a cat. And yeah, I can say, prior to my carnivore journey over the past like 6 years roughly, and before that I was doing intermittent fasting, carb cycling, all the sort of different things. They all have their utility. It's not like I tried one of them, oh, it's rubbish. It's like, yeah, they all kind of work and they're all better than, most other options. I mean, we can kind of come together and conclude that perhaps a vegetarian way of eating might not be optimal, just from a number of different standpoints. But the reality is we're both eating a very meat-heavy sort of diet, and both value the utility of a nutrient-dense diet, reducing the potential toxins and anti-nutrients. I know yourself, you'll use things like white rice, things like that, a bit of fruit here and there, which are probably more innocuous than Pop-Tarts and Twinkies. So I can get behind that. It's not I think a lot of people try to think it's a him versus him or him versus her kind of thing, but the reality is, Rob, I know you're not going to do something that's not going to work. The same with me. It's like, well, how do we get to our end point? And we've just found slightly different ways to get it done, So,
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. I mean, I've said throughout my entire career and the time that I've kind of been on the internet, I've always said that what I do is a hybrid approach, utilizing different components and different tools in order to optimize what's going to be best for me and my results. And I also extend that to my coaching clients. Like you said, there's more than one ways to skin a cat, and we're all, we're all bio-individual to some way. And what works for one is not necessarily going to work for the other. And you can't be dogmatic about the approach. And I've said from the outset, I really believe if you want to cure the obesity crisis and bring back a level of health and even implement and focus on longevity, if everybody would just focus first on just eating single ingredient whole foods, nutrient dense foods, regardless of the division of macros to some degree, then we'd all be far better off. To attack someone who is training hard, who's doing all the components necessary to achieve a phenomenal physique, optimized body composition, and also focusing on health and longevity, your blood work's good. If someone decides to incorporate a little bit of white rice, which people have been consuming for tens of thousands of years, or, a freaking potato, and it optimizes their approach, then I'm not going to argue with that. However, if somebody comes to me and says, within the current format that I'm currently eating, I feel like I've achieved some level of result, but I feel like perhaps it's not optimized according to the goal that I have set for myself, then we have to roll up our sleeves and investigate that further. And whether it be for some getting some benefit from adding some carbohydrate into their diet, or even reducing the amount of carbohydrate in their diet, we have to determine that to each individual. And, I have clear results. Let me back up. I think it's important to note that when I decided to jump back into competitive bodybuilding, I had taken 3 and it bled into 4 years off from competition. And very, very well that if you are in the competitive realm and you take that long of a hiatus, it's very difficult to reproduce not only the physique that you once had, but then if the goal is to make that even better. My runway was very short. So after 3, then 4 years off, I had 7 months to recomp as much lean tissue as I possibly could, and then simultaneously leave myself enough runway to be able to peel that body fat off and get down to literally 4% body fat. So for me, I knew that my approach had to be the absolute most optimized approach to not only getting back what I had, but then making it even better. And that's at 57 years old. So I sort of went back into my toolbox. I've been doing this since the mid-90s. Grew up in the hardcore 90s bodybuilding culture. Am fortunate enough to have worked with some top level coaches and be able to correspond with them. And based on my due diligence and the success I had when I did incorporate some carbs in my diet, which would generally be pre and post workout, and then I would incorporate some very structured glycogen refeeds, typically like 1 day a week or on the weekend, I found for me that was probably the minimum effective dose for competitive bodybuilding at the level that I'm doing it in the NPC, trying to get to Masters Nationals, perhaps even earn a pro card. And then after doing that due diligence and incorporating carb cycling, which honestly, if you polled 10,000 high-level competitive bodybuilders, probably 9,500 of them are doing some level of carb cycling. And when I did incorporate that, I noticed for me, I got better results in terms of the overall aesthetic. My performance improved. I had no ill effects from the further incorporation of carbohydrate coming from clean single ingredient sources. And you could arguably say it helped me produce the best physique that I've ever had. Definitely the most peeled I've ever been in this recent competition that I did just 8 weeks ago, which also earned me a spot at Masters Nationals in July of 2026. And just to stack one thing on top of that, probably the result that I'm the most proud of in my competitive career is earning a second place in the light heavyweight in the open division. And for those people not familiar with bodybuilding competition, the open division is all ages. It was a large class, probably 10, 12 guys, very, very good athletes. And I was fortunate enough to place second, competing against guys in their 20s and 30s. So for me, that was a proud moment, and it made me realize that I had really pushed the envelope as hard as I possibly could, and the ultimate outcome of that was extremely positive. So I have no regrets. What really surprised me is I was kind of just casually mentioning on YouTube throughout the course of that competition prep that I was incorporating carb cycling. I was not so strict carnivore anymore, and nobody seemed to have a problem with that. But once the competition was over and I'd kind of announced that I'm kind of backing off a little bit from strict, if you will, carnivore and continuing on with a carb cycling approach, and that I had found that there was a handful, not all, clients that I work with very closely who have also experienced optimized results making that switch. And then there are some that are doing spectacular just on very strict carnivore, which I said, leave it alone, keep doing what you're doing. And the result of that was very, very positive. And I was kind of taken aback with the level of attacks that I was getting from many people in the community simply over a decision that I had made of the way that I was going to consume food as a rational, logical thinking adult. And so then when the opportunity came for you and I to speak together, I thought it was the stars had just lined up perfectly because we had agreed on so many things. And your approach has always been very logical, very rational, super intelligent. So this is the perfect opportunity, as I said before, to kind of unite under that and let people know that, hey, choose your own path, just be intelligent with it, weigh out the options and find what works best for you. So sorry to take so long with that answer, but I think it needed to be said.
No, you're completely right. I mean, it needs to be said because people can comment on this, after the chat, in the comments below and say, "Oh, but Rob, oxalate." It's like, do you think Rob doesn't know about oxalate? But Rob, whatever, fill in the gap with whatever generic carnivore sort of narrative we always hear about, and it's like, you and I both know that sort of thing. It's old hat to us. We've been doing ketogenic / carnivore diets for a long time. It's not news to us by any means. Exactly. You're likely saying this, but like, there's a study done, I believe it's 1991. I don't know the authors. Please don't ask if you Google it, guys. But the study which looked at the society impact of different food groups by, I think it's caloric value. And what was at the top? One of them was actually, I think it's potato, something like that. One of them was like egg whites or protein powder. It's like, well, what we know about foods that offer certain satiety levels that make dietary adherence a lot easier.
Right.
That's what we tend to find. So, I mean, whether you use white potatoes as your energy source, rice, or something like, the animal fats, they all kind of do something. That's the main point. The reality is, you achieve what you've achieved, regardless of your age, is incredible. It's phenomenal. It's not, people don't quite give enough respect for what it is, I think. 4% body fat for anyone is hard work. I know it's hard work. When I sat at a bus stop and I can just feel my ass going between the cracks almost, it hurts. It really hurts. Imagine just doing that and still running, a full-time work job, training clients, working as a coach, producing content. It's not an easy feat to achieve. It's hard to manage. So, I mean, anyone who's achieved anything, regardless, deserves that absolute respect and accolade for sure. I know you guys keep saying about the audio, and it's been explained in the chat already, on my end at least. I've tried to set up my audio thing. I've got, 60 quid lavalier. I've got a £250 microphone over there somewhere, but I can't actually access it anymore. I can't get it to my screen. I can't sit in this chair for very long anymore. But consider you guys lucky that I actually sat down in the chair a lot, lying down in bed, which I'm doing 95% of my day anyway.
I'm getting most of what you're saying. So if I give some ridiculous comment, it's because I only got every third word and I misinterpreted what you said. But I'm getting the gist of it, so hopefully it'll translate okay. So sucks that we're going through that because we have, I think, some very, very important things to share with people. And again, your level of experience and the level of physique that you've been able to produce over the years is spectacular. And it brought out this visceral, just, feeling in me when you were attacked by a few people in the group. And I'm like, this kind of sums up the frustrations that I've been having, that, why can't we just, congratulate people on their accolades and what they're doing? And I know how you eat. It's super well thought out. It's super intelligent. And for me, being involved in the carnivore community for these great number of years that I look at that as being this massive blessing, because I still work with a large number of ketogenic, carnivore, low-carb athletes who are thriving and doing phenomenal. It's everything they wanted it to be. So we stay within that realm and we just nuance that. But clearly, if you have clients that come to you, which I have legitimate documented case studies of a great variety of clients, and I've got the receipts, including blood work, when someone comes to you and says, I've been doing very strict carnivore, and I know that they have, and if they're a high-functioning strength training athlete especially, and I found this to be the most true in women. And there is some literature around that out there, but in my personal experience, when you have a woman that comes to you, and it's happened multiple times, and she says, I did nothing but meat for X number of months, or maybe even a year, and I'm coming to you because I'm concerned because my performance is lacking, I'm having some serious issues with T3 reduction into reverse T3, some thyroid dysfunction. My cycle is, I've missed my cycle. My hair's falling out. I have insomnia. My recovery's not so great. And then we take an intelligent, very conservative approach with these people by slowly titrating up a small level of carbohydrate. And we even try to structure it around bouts of training or effort-based consumption. And when you see the overwhelming majority of this group of individuals get real success from that and alleviation from some of the problems that they've had, it's something that you can't ignore. So you have to listen to the client and intelligently approach each individual case and work toward that. And in some of these cases, it's just been adding 1 or 2 meals of some carbohydrate around their training approach, maybe adding in a certain level for recovery purposes. Some have done well just by sprinkling in a little bit of fruit and rice and potato, but they're still predominantly meat, egg heavy, and it's worked. And to ignore that and just say, oh, you just didn't carnivore hard enough, or you did it wrong. That you have to pay attention to that. And then with me, having my own personal experience through a rigorous 7-month competition prep and being not almost to a level of concern of, can I do this again? And then when I changed my approach and the results were staggeringly positive, and I not only produced the result that I wanted, but it was even better than I had hoped for, then for me to ignore that and then just go back to something just so I can be part of a club and use it as just sort of a social ideology, to me is just asinine. And, just to reiterate a previous point, if we can just unite around getting people to get rid of processed foods, to get rid of industrial seed oils, to stop eating at fast food restaurants, get all the garbage out of their diet, and then just switch down to that single ingredient whole food and bring in energy components, whether it be from fat or carbohydrate, at a particular level that enhances their performance without spilling over and causing any detrimental side effects, then that's a victory. And I remember recently seeing some influencer out on Instagram who generally promotes to just mainly women. And some of you may know who this is, but I don't mention names. I don't play that game. But she literally did a Instagram reel where she said, and I quote, if you eat half of an apple, that apple will instantly convert to visceral body fat on your body immediately. Now, you and I know that that is exquisite bullshit, that that's not the way the body works. And these poor women that are putting their trust and faith in her are going to be so frustrated. They're going to be like, well, I can't even have an apple. I'm trying to change my life. I'm trying to change my body composition. I'm trying to gain some lean mass, gain some, some improved level of health and longevity. And we're focusing on an apple when we should be focusing on such far greater detrimental and destructive things. It just confuses the whole landscape, and everybody just wants to throw their hands up and say, I freaking quit, So I think we're missing the plot. But then at the end, there are so many grifters online on these social media accounts that have something to sell. They have an image to project, and content becomes scarce when you're posting 3-5 times a week, that you start to just go to fear mongering and scaring the living shit out of people. And all that does is create chaos in the landscape, and people don't know what direction to turn anymore. And I've always said from the start, since I started doing this on YouTube back, in my ketogenic bodybuilding days, I'm going to tell you what I believe is going to work for you as an individual, whatever that may be. I'm not beholden to any club or organization. My ideology and my whole reputation doesn't exist around some named diet. I prefer a meat-heavy diet, as most bodybuilders do. And I think even for the general population, that's going to be your best course of action to take. And if you have severe metabolic distress from decades, perhaps, of abuse from these highly processed foods and industrial seed oils and the overproduction of shitty carbohydrates, then absolutely. My course of action to many is, hey, we need to pull back, if not fully eliminate the carbohydrate element for a considerable amount of time until we can repair the damage. And then we find that over that course of time, we do repair the body, and then we can slowly reintroduce some of these foods back in, which for many make the diet even more sustainable and enjoyable for them without it completely going off the rails. So you have to account for each individual. And it's been said many times, what's the perfect diet? Well, it's the diet that's the most sustainable for you that still produces a good result. And I think that's what we have to focus on when we're dealing with these people. And the fact that you and I can come together, we're slightly different in our approaches, but we're all moving toward the same goal. And at the end of the day, when we're dealing with a client or someone on the internet, our heart is in the right place, that we want to make them a healthier, thriving human being. And we're not sticking to trendy, obscure named diets, as a be all end all. We're willing to pivot where the pivot might be necessary in order for them to get the result that they're looking for. So this is a conversation that needs to happen. And, it's frustrating, but at the same time, it's kind of liberating. And, when people say, what diet are you on? I'm like, I'm just on the diet that works for me. You can't put my diet on a t-shirt. It's just, this is the approach that works for me. And I found a level that is sustainable, enjoyable, that produces great results and still focuses on overall good health. So I think that's where we all need to kind of shift and pivot and kind of reach out as a community to help those who are truly broken, rather than arguing amongst ourselves over, you just didn't do it right, you didn't do it hard enough, you should have fasted more, or whatever. I think that's a direction we need to go, and I think it would be a refreshing take that the whole community would enjoy.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm going to give 3 different examples of people that follow different diets, but they're all able to achieve the outcomes they want. Generally speaking, they're all similar, so I class animal-based or myself carnivore sort of thing. So me, carnivore diet, meat, fish, eggs, dairy, protein powder, sweeteners, some seasoning. If I eat too much, obviously cut back. Sensible approach. I love Pepsi Max, caffeine free. God forbid. What else? And every 3 weeks, roughly, Rob, which I've always said this since the start. I have a meal out of family, and might be like a British roast dinner. It might be a meat-based thing with a bit of mashed potato and gravy, something like that. That's every 3 weeks. But when you look at the grand scheme of things, I'm still by nutritive value 99% plus carnivore. I've been tracking my nutrition intake religiously for 10 years. Right? So I know what I've been eating and what proportion, how many carbs, how many protein, how many fat over that entire duration. And yeah, it does, at least over the past maybe 6 years, it's been about 99% carnivore. Now, the second example, my brother. My brother understands the principles around carnivore diets, animal-based, all this sort of stuff. He's very much my way of thinking, but he's got a newborn baby. He's loves to go to the cinema on a weekend with his friends. So yeah, he's gonna have a pint of beer or something every now and then. Is he having one every day? No, he's not. He's not an idiot. Then he wants to have maybe one weekend every now and then. He'll have a giant box of popcorn at the cinema because he likes popcorn. But he can stop it there. He can say the popcorn next day, keto, whatever it has in a normal day, Then I've got another third example. So I've got a client who I'd say I just give them a cap. I just say these are your best options of what foods you can have in like the plant kingdom. It's very much animal based, but keep it under 50 grams of carbs a day. That's just based on what she needs, her output, expenditure, how her brain feels, how her dopamine levels are, like how she subjectively feels each day. And that's giving her the best bang for her buck. Now, if I was to then say to any of these other people, go strict carnivore, they're going to be pissed off. They're not going to be happy. Like you said, they're not going to stick to it. Adherence is going to be a right bastard. So what am I going to tell them? No, you've done it wrong. You failed. And science is right and mechanisms of this. Some people don't care about mechanisms. They just want to feel a bit better and live a better life than what they were before. That's kind of my standpoint. We touch a bit on training as well, just because I know people probably ask about our training methodologies. Ultimately, we've kind of went for our diet as it stands right now, our sort of approach. But how would you approach your training? Because I know you're an advocate of like high intensity sort of stuff as well.
Yeah.
At least from what I remember.
Yeah, I was fortunate enough to grow up in the hardcore bodybuilding 90s, and right out of the gate, I started training really hard in 1994, and Dorian Yates was God. At that time, the consensus was you train until you puke, and then you go eat a obscene amount of food, and then you go train some more. And it was about intensity, intensity, intensity. And that just made logical sense to me. And when you went through the mechanisms of how growth occurs and the stimulation of growth, and then you're talking about compensation, which is the recovery of the training stimulus, and then the goal being overcompensation, which is to convince the body because of the level of intensity that you've applied to the muscle that it has no choice but to grow additional tissue as a defense mechanism against that level of intensity you applied. And in layman's terms, that level of intensity means taking certain sets to the point of momentary concentric failure. And that made total sense to me. And to be honest, I got the greatest level of success in my own physique when I went from more of a volume training split to a super high intensity 4-day split, where my workouts were generally never more than about 40 minutes. And that's when I achieved the greatest level of growth. And I still do that to this day. And obviously you have to be concerned with, safe approaches to the movements themselves, very strict adherence to very meticulous form. But again, reaching a level that you convince the body that as a defense mechanism for preservation of life, if you get to a point in your set where another repetition is truly not possible, then your body has no option other than we need to grow new tissue in the event that he ever does this again to be able to keep him safe and have more lean tissue to compensate for that level of output, which you're going to do next week in the next workout. So I've always been a fan of high intensity, lower volume training. And it's always served me very well. And the majority of the clients that I work with are also utilizing that approach. And I haven't got any complaints yet. In fact, the overwhelming consensus from the people that I work with in the trenches are, since switching over to a higher intensity, less volume-based training approach, their results have been improved as well. So once again, I know you're not allowed to use anecdotes anymore, But anecdotally, when you're working with people in real time, day in and day out, and you see the real time progress that people make, well, then it's kind of hard to push against that. So that's the way I go. I probably never do more than 3 sets on any exercise. And the way I approach it is Dorian-esque. And the way he explained it, and he grew up with, he made his switch studying under Arthur Jones and Mike Mentzer, who I also was able to study under. I was able to do some consulting with Mike Mentzer back in the 90s, which was really cool. And so he will do a percentage of effort in his first set. Think of it as a warm-up. So he calls it a feeder set. So he might do, like if you're doing, let's say, a heavy squat, he may do his first set at roughly 60% of what his perceived maximum effort might be. And then he might up it a little bit more, and the second set might be at roughly 70 to 75% of perceived maximal effort. And then on that final all-out set, it's all out. It's everything that you can possibly put into that final set, short of literally collapsing under the bar, with very controlled, strict form. And the concept is you then force the muscle under that level of stress to have no other option but to grow new tissue. And that's the way I approach every set that I do and every movement that I do. And I still do, I don't call it a bro split. I call it a pro split. And that's not my term. I stole it from Fouad Abiad, the great bodybuilder, and that makes perfect sense to me. And I think also, along with carb cycling, I think the overwhelming majority of the guys and women that are operating at that higher level, and especially in the competitive realm, are doing some version of that. And that's always served me well. I tried push-pull legs. That didn't work well for me. I went back to a pro split, focusing on that level of intensity, and that's always served me the best. And I'll never turn back from that.
That's fair enough. Yeah, I mean, in principle, I have the same belief system as you, really, in terms of like training as hard as you can until you can recover. If you can't recover, you're doing too much. That's pretty much it.
Exactly.
See, there's different metrics we can look at to sort of decide how much is or is too little. That's the value of having a good coach, I think, because they'll be able to sort of look at your markers, your numbers, digestion, sleep, appetite, all these sort of things which come into it. It's like, oh, that's a bit off this week. Why is, you can pick apart what they're doing wrong. But what I want to sort of get across, this may seem obvious to people listening to this, but the same not. As you're listening to both Rob and I right now, you're not speaking to people with 2 different anecdotes. You're speaking to 2 people with perhaps thousands of different anecdotes worth of experience. So when you approach either one of us, you say, what's the best training program? We can say there's probably something like maybe, I don't know, 2 sets, this many exercises, this many times per week. But very few people fit into that middle ground. So, I mean, some people I work with are doing 2 sessions per week, about 6 sets per workout, 12 sets per week. Some people I'm working with are doing 50 per week, but that's what they can do. It's very individualized, and I want to hear your opinion on this as well. So my thought is that the top pro bodybuilders in the world, regardless of whatever dietary approach they have, is irrelevant. But do you find that the most success, the most musculature, the best physiques are the most laid back, chill people that just relax with it, follow the method, and just try and enjoy it?
100%. And that's a very important point to illustrate. And I definitely see that. Very laid back, meticulous in nature, not high strung, not high stress, not, bucket loads of cortisol pumping through their system. 100%. Yeah.
Yeah. So my kind of training outline, if people wanted to hear what it was, most people would look at it without knowing me or seeing me train in the gym. It's not optimal. My training isn't optimal, but you might ask, well, why do you do it if it's not optimal? It's not optimal for most people. So I'm working around different injuries, time constraints, energy levels, recovery capacities that simply don't let me follow a regimented pro split, bro split, push-pull legs, upper lower. But what I can say just over the past year or two is I found the most success actually doing somewhat of a full body split. So what we're doing is doing my strongest body parts once per week. A bit like you, Rob, I've got big ass calves, big biceps. It's like I'm not going to be caning them 3 times a week. It's just not.
No.
There's no point. You work by what the judges' feedback is, so you can progress and get a better rating score from your next federation competition, whatever. Then the stronger body part, the weaker body parts, maybe twice per week. But I'm also under the constraint of what I can do with certain body parts. So, for example, if it's a leg press, that's a strong movement for me. My quads, I only need to do, I think I do about 1 or 2 sets of leg press per week. So quad volume, maybe 4 to 5 sets per week maximum. Then you might look at my hamstring workout, and that's 6 or 7 sets per week. Then you might look at my back workout, that might be 7 or 8, 9 sets per week. But that's simply because a lot of the back movements people typically do, like a bent over row, I can't. So I'm not going to get that full upper back development from bent over rows, deadlifts, things like that. So I have to be a bit more meticulous with like isolation. So that's how I'm accumulating more sets. That's kind of been my experience of training. But yeah, do we have any questions actually from the group? Because I understand we obviously posted and asked if they had any sort of concerns or worries about their own training or diet or whatever. I think we might have had one on carb cycling, but I think we might have covered it.
Well, I think maybe to quickly address carb cycling, just for anybody that might be confused with the cycling part, I think that's important to note that is also nuanced, meaning that depending on what phase you're in your prep, or if you're just the general population and you're going through sort of a mass gain phase, and then you might enter into more of a cut phase to maybe look good for summer, or if you're a competitor, it's definitely broken up into very meticulous phases. The cycling part of carb cycling is understanding that the level of carbohydrate you take in is relative to the amount of output that you're putting in the gym. So I have what I call moderate days, low days, and I do a super compensation day 1 day a week. So my general training days, I'm taking in X number of carbohydrate to fill the muscle with just enough muscle glycogen without spilling over to produce the greatest level of, high intensity muscular contractions in the gym. And it also serves me well aesthetically. You get the fullness in the muscle, you get the vascularity, you get the phenomenal pump. And on my low days, which are my non-training days, which for me are just the weekends now, and I'll explain why, I greatly reduce that carbohydrate load, because if you're not going through super high intensity training sessions, or if you're not super active, then the need for carbohydrate during those days is reduced. And then I'll bring the fat up a little bit on those days. And then on my one super compensation day, I will take in a maximal amount of carbohydrate, even risking the slight spillover, which is okay, because it's really a physiological state where when you do that one high day on your hardest training day, for me, that's leg day, you get a serious metabolic shift from that. It's kind of like throwing gas on a fire. And what's really wild about it is, whenever I would do my high carb day, like say for instance, this is going to sound high to people who don't eat carbs. It's really not. If a moderate day for me was 350 grams of carbs and a low day was 100 grams of carbs, that high day might be 500 grams, all coming from rice, potato, things of that nature. What would generally happen the day after the high day is, yes, you're going to be maybe up a pound on the scale, but as you very well know, that pound isn't body fat. That's not the way the body works. That's going to be an excess of glycogen retained in the muscle. And for every gram of glycogen that you have, you're going to support more intercellular fluid to support it. So more carbs you have, the more fluid that you retain. For every gram of glycogen, it's about 2.3 grams of water that carry it. So the day after a high carb day, I would generally be about a pound up on the scale, which meant nothing to me. But in almost every case throughout the entire 7 months, about 48 hours after, especially when I was cutting, I would then be down a pound to a pound and a half. And it was an interesting state to be in, especially when I was cutting. And I tell this story, and people are probably sick of it if you follow me on my channel, but in the final 2 weeks of prep leading up to peak week, 2 weeks out, I cut carbs to almost zero on my low days, trying to get that last little bit of body fat off that just is stubborn and doesn't want to come off. And you're 5% body fat and you're trying to get to 4% body fat. That's harder than going from 15 to 10. So on that 2 weeks out, I had 3 zero carb days, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And I was trying to make weight for the light heavyweight, and I could not get off of 199 pounds to save my life. I went into peak week thinking, screw it, I'll just go heavyweight. I'm not going to make the 198 3/4 cutoff. And then on Monday, I added 80 grams of carbs back in, and I lost a pound. Tuesday, I went up to 150 grams roughly. I lost another pound. Wednesday, I went to 220 grams, lost another pound. Long story short, when I weighed in Friday night at 5:30, I was 196.4. And on Sunday, I was 199 and couldn't get the scale to move. And then after I weighed in at 196.4 at the weigh-in, I go back to the Airbnb night before the show. And roughly from 6 p.m. until about 11 p.m. before I crashed out, I took in an additional 150 grams of carbohydrate from cream of rice and honey. And I woke up the morning of the show at 191 pounds and absolutely peeled to the bone, which many who don't understand how that can work, especially for somebody who is that lean and that insulin sensitive and being in a deficit, and how it can react to stimulating the production of body fat reduction in the body, it sounds completely counterintuitive. But the more carbohydrate I took in, the leaner I got. And it's just, again, it's like throwing gas on a fire. And you can manipulate that in certain ways on a strict carnivore diet using fat loading and sodium loading. But for me, it was far less arduous to get really, really lean on a carb cycling diet than it was back when I was doing probably 90% carnivore, just doing refeeds and pre and post workout carbohydrates. So obviously I'm not going to change if things are working spectacularly for me. And at the same time, I had another female client who was also competing in the same show, and we did the same thing with her. And her results were staggeringly good for that. And it brought her into the perfect look we were looking for on stage. So that's what the cycling part of carb cycling in. It's not just throwing a bunch of shit carbs at you, with reckless abandon. It's about taking the time to understand each individual's threshold of what they can handle without spilling over to produce the desired effect for what somebody who's really grinding in the gym or training hard or super active. And it's also important to note that, when you're carb cycling, you're choosing a dominant energy component. So for me, it used to be fat was my dominant energy component, and I would take in some carbs and keep them low. Now carbohydrate is my dominant energy component, but it's very nuanced, and I've reduced my level of dietary exogenous fat. So also when you have competing energy sources like too much fat, too much carbohydrate, Jonathan, you know this very well, you know the science of it, it's a train wreck when you have competing energy sources at that level. So, even though it might sound, like voodoo to some people in the low carb space, you have to make sure that you choose that dominant energy component, reduce the other energy component. But when you reduce the fat, it's also important to note that you don't want to go too low because you need to take in a certain level for proper balanced hormonal output. So again, everything is very nuanced and it's very structured. So people, I think, oftentimes don't understand the level that yourself and I go through meticulously working through these numbers. And any coach out there that says, I've got the perfect dietary macros formula for you because I'm a coach, well, they're a grifter. nobody knows the formula. So what we do is we apply an intelligent baseline to the individual based on the information that we gather from them, knowing exactly what the client engages in every day. We do then set an intelligent baseline based on our experience, and then we nuance those numbers over the course of time. So I'll set some particular numbers, work very closely with the client, and over about 4 to 6 weeks, we track the results and then we adjust. We then track the results again and then we adjust and keep working that client towards their end game goal and making sure that they're always progressing forward. So regardless of which dietary approach that you decide to go with, it still has to be very calculated and very nuanced. And I know in the low carb space, it's like, you know, you don't have to track, you don't have to do this. Well, yeah, I mean, for many Gen Pop individuals, especially when you know your body, tracking may have.
That's the question.
But exactly, if you're trying to get if you're trying to be that 1% of the fucking population that looks like an absolute freak, then you'd better account for every damn thing you put in your mouth, because that's just the way it works. And even if you're not a competitor, it's like people say, well, you just work with a bunch of bodybuilders? No. I mean, I've got like 50 people at my highest level coaching level, and only 3 of them are competitors. The rest are just normal people, but these normal people want to be at the absolute peak of their genetic, whatever their genetic potential is. So even they understand, if I want to be part of that tiny, minuscule, segment of the population that is always the freak in the room, whatever room they walk into, then you're going to have to take what you do nutritionally with your training, with your recovery, and you're going to have to track and assess and be meticulous. If you're trying to build a business, a very successful business, there's checks and balances. There's credits and debits. You're monitoring everything that you do to make that business successful, and you follow the trends of that business to produce the result that makes you ultimately successful and lets the business sustain itself successfully. You have to do the same thing with your body and everything that you do. So that's where the need for a coach comes into. So if you're listening to this, do a consult with Jonathan, hire him as a coach. If I'm more your cup of tea, I'm available too. Or seek out somebody that that you've researched and that they tick off all the boxes, and that they have that level of experience and severe dedication to the tiny details that will help you bring in the best result for you. But understand, you're going to have to work really hard for that. And it just blows me away when people think they can just kind of be nonchalant and sort of half-assed about it, and then pissed off when they don't get the result they were looking for, and then blame it on, I should have fasted more, or, whatever. I mean, it's just a tiny segment of what we do. So, I just wanted to make sure that people understand that, for people who find what I'm doing strange, it's still very calculated and it's very nuanced, just like I was when I did it more carnivore. When I did carnivore bodybuilding back in 2019 and 2021 and still had great success, every cut of meat was weighed, every egg was accounted for, and the little bit of carbohydrate that I brought in was weighed to the gram. I calculated everything according to what my output and needs were, and then adjusted in real time as I went to get as lean and shredded as I needed to be. So don't ever think that whatever you're embarking on is not going to require a massive level of effort on your part, or it's just not going to work. And that's why you don't see thousands of shredded, fit men and women walking around the streets anymore. It's become a severe minority. And honestly, that's very sad. I hate to see that, but that's just the reality of it.
That's it. I mean, there's been a few people who have commented in the chat I've taken on as different points pro clients, basically, because I can see how hard they work, but it's not their ability to try hard, it's the application of knowledge they didn't quite get.
Right.
So what I basically was trying to do with them is what you just said, like, you're looking at checking photos. Okay, the scale weight says this, but your training performance has gone down this much. Do you really need to refeed or not? or do you need to cycle in extra fats or this? People will obviously ask in your carnivore bodybuilding Facebook group, how much carb should I do? There's no way to know. You look at my physique. I'm a big, heavy, relatively sort of guy. I'm 6'1". You'd think, oh, Jonathan, you be fat loading on 600 grams per day or something. No, for me to fill up from the most depleted state, I did something like 200 grams roughly, in addition to my baseline diet for the last 2 to 3 days. Yet that yielded the fullness that would take almost 1,000 grams. I can't explain why. I don't know why, but that's what happened. It's been the same with other clients as well. So it's when Rob here is saying like it's calculated. Yeah, we're tracking macros, what we're taking in, how many grams with different food types, things like that. But it's not so much always about what makes logical sense. So it might be that Rob did that, 3-day low or zero carb thing just to get the last bit of fat off. Most people that did that, cortisol might spike and they might actually halt fat loss. They're stuck in bed, They can't move anymore, they're tired, they're not recovering anymore, the training performance goes down, they start to lose muscle faster. And that's sometimes when the body can start churning. No matter how much you try to refeed, your body's just stressed out. So the only way you're going to know that is experience from doing it yourself or hiring a coach. So I encourage anyone to sort of hire Rob or myself to just get that extra input, because I have my own coach. Same with Rob. We don't know all the answers. We need that second eye, that on our back saying, yeah, I think you could dig a bit harder, And
that's an excellent point.
I mean, like my most recent contest prep, I didn't do any cardio for that one at all. I do 4K steps a day, so sod all. And what did I do? I mean, I was already in good shape anyway, but what we actually utilized less of was fat loads or refeeds. So in an 8-week span, I think I only had about 3 days of 50 grams of fat. That was it, on top of my baseline diet. But the thing I like about carnivore for myself is that the result incremental, like steady. I've not got to battle with, high carb day, weight's gone up. It's less to think about. It's that for me, I'm autistic. I like straightforward stuff. So for me, it's easy to see what my body's doing day by day. Get on the scales, and tomorrow and yesterday and today and whatever, I'm eating the same pretty much macros. I know damn well my weight will be within about 1/4 of a kilo of what it was yesterday. I'll go on the scales tomorrow and it'll say exactly that. It's but because I'm doing, I do have a coach currently, but I'm monitoring the off season myself, just because I like having that freedom bit, because it takes the mind off it a little bit, because I'm accountable anyway, and I'm sure you are. So we don't need someone telling us what to eat every day. So yeah, but that's just been my experience. So, yeah, I'm on board, and your carb cycling experience is pretty much bang on, does what everyone else does in the industry. So yeah, all good.
Yeah, it's funny. It's to really illustrate the difference between individuals. And you mentioned that second set of eyes. I'm fortunate enough that prior to starting this last prep, I brought in a new teammate with my training staff at my gym who is an IFBB pro. He is a IFBB pro bodybuilder. He got his pro card, is very talented, former champion powerlifter, now a pro bodybuilder. And his wife, she has a long career of helping competitors with their diet. So I'm like, hey, you guys know that when you get deep into a prep, your brain goes haywire, you question everything. So they were holding me accountable, and it was an invaluable thing to have. But you had mentioned that you needed less in order to achieve the look that you were looking for. And it's about chasing a look, not a number on a scale. For me, what was wild is, and that first show was a qualifier, which was also a great sort of experiment to realize what I needed to do in order to stand on a national stage and compete nationally against the best of the best. And after we did that final peak week carb load, and after, I did the prejudging and was fortunate enough to come out with a class win and qualify, the immediate general consensus from the two people that were helping me, my wife, my son, who's also very into bodybuilding, and the promoter of the show, who's also a close friend with Jay Cutler, all of them came to me and said, you should have taken even more. because the more I took in, the fuller and the better I looked. And when I did the prejudging, which is in the morning, it was a peeled look, but it was still a little flat, but it was still good enough to win. And then when I came back hours later for the evening show, the promoter came up to me and he said, "Shit, man, what did you do between the prejudging and the evening show?" And I said, "I took in another 150 grams of carbs." And he said, "Yeah, man, you probably needed even more food because you just look fuller and more shredded and more vascular." And then there's some people that they need less. And it's, again, just like you said, it's a perfect point. It's so nuanced to the individual, and you're trying to achieve a certain look. And having that person in your corner to say, "There it is. Okay, we've achieved it. Now hold, and let's maintain that into the stage." That's invaluable, because so many people be like questioning it. "Well, I read on Reddit that I'm supposed to do this, or this guy said to do that," or, hunger signals and brain fog take over and you end up eating too much, or you freak out and you're scared, so you don't take in enough. And it equates to not getting the look that you want on stage, or even if it's the look you want standing on the beach for that vacation that you planned, and that's what you're working for. You got to have that second set of eyes in your corner that can walk you through that and say, with a very calm demeanor, "I know what I'm doing. Let's do this. Let's take this approach. That looks good. Change that. Okay, we're there. Now hold it. Be confident. We've got what we wanted." And that's the perfect illustration that you said with, you didn't need 300 grams to load or 500 grams. You found that 200 worked better. And that's a very important distinction to understand when you're doing that for yourself, because the tiniest little miscalculation can throw the entire thing off into the weeds. So, you better really do your homework, or get somebody in your corner that knows how to assess your physique and make those real-time changes on the fly.
That's it. I mean, that's bang on. It's people that see it as bodybuilders, people that just go to the gym, eat a lot of food, but you have to be calculated to get it right, especially at our level. We're not trying to. We've got the muscle we have, we can get in shape, but there's a certain look you have on stage. So I can send you a picture of me on Monday when I'm depleted as hell. My show day might be Saturday, Sunday, and it's like, you're about 15 pounds heavier. No, I'm actually a bit lighter. But I look about 15 pounds heavier. It's quite a marvel. But I think, I don't know how comfortable you are talking about this, and I'm happy to sort of chime in my thoughts. But like PED, supplementation, anything like that. Do you have like underlying principles?
Well, first of all, I'll start with this, and this is my general response. People will often, I don't talk about it unless they ask me, and then I'm completely honest. When people say, "Oh, are you enhanced? Are you on gear?" I'm like, I am competing at a national level in NPC bodybuilding. Of course I am. But then at the same time, I've got a fairly strict policy of not going into exactly dosages and things like that. Because when you do that, the first thing they're going to say is that you're a liar. When I tell people I do far less than you think I do, which I do, and I'm not on that many compounds, I do the basic androgens and hormonal, the testosterone. I do a very small amount of growth hormone, both of which, being a 57-year-old man, would probably be a fairly intelligent thing to do anyway, just for somebody my age that wants to keep performing at the highest level and feel and perform like I'm 30. So I make no apologies for that. So you ask any top-level prep coach or bodybuilder, what's the standard? They're going to tell you, testosterone is your base. If you can, do some growth hormone, and then throw in your favorite anabolic. Now, I have severe reactions to any nandrolone-based anabolic. I cannot do DECA. I can't do NPP. I can't do any of that stuff. I don't do trenbolone. I don't do any of these crazy, exotic, dangerous, side effect-ridden compounds. So for me, it was a very simple formula of a just slightly into the super physiological realm of testosterone. People say I'm lying when I tell them 3 to 4 IUs of GH is about all I'll go. And then I'm a fan of a little bit of equipoise. And that's me. That's what I do. And then when I'm cutting, I sprinkle in some clenbuterol because that works really well. And that combined with the super meticulous diet is what's going to get you shredded anyway. You mentioned you didn't do cardio. I did almost none. And I was concerned about muscle wasting, tissue wasting, having a stringy or flat look from doing too much cardio. So I made the decision I was just going to stay active. For me, it's about 8 to 10,000 steps a day just because I'm on a gym floor all day. And that's all I needed to get down to that super peeled look. So, and we're in an age now, thank God, where even competitors at the highest level are being very transparent with what they're doing in terms of compounds. And what we're confirming, and I rub elbows with some top coaches. I rub elbows with a couple of coaches who are at the Olympia level. They don't lie to me. They tell me exactly what their guys are doing. And it would shock most people what their dosages are. But then you go down to the local gym and find the local gym bro who's out in the back alley buying God knows what and just getting dosages off Reddit, who's injecting copious amounts, multiple grams of the stuff. And they look like dog shit because they don't focus on their training. They don't focus on their diet. And they get to a point where they've passed the level of result, and now it's bleeding into the level of side effects. And that's a very important distinction that people need to understand. There's a minimum effective dose for everything. There's a minimum effective dose for what you eat. There's a minimum effective dose for the amount of training. There's a minimum effective dose for recovery and sleep. And there's a minimum effective dose for any, exogenous compounds that you're taking in when you're competing at the high level. So it's important that when you're working with somebody or if somebody is looking into this, make sure that everything starts very low and titrates up very slowly, and you keep finding that minimum effective dose, because if you just go more is better, then you're just going to dip into the side effect realm and everything's going to fall apart. And you check your blood work, you make sure you feel great, there's no side effects. I mean, I never had a single side effect. I still don't. Now that it's off season, I'm just on a common TRT dose like any doctor would prescribe. And I was on stage at 192 pounds, and I'm sitting here today at 216 pounds. And all I'm doing is basic TRT. So my post-show rebound has been working spectacular. And that's from the fact that when you step off of the stage, you're so lean that you're extremely insulin sensitive. You're so depleted at that point that your body is begging to store something. So if you come off of the show and you start eating a bunch of garbage and pounding a bunch of gear, then your body is going to store that mainly as fat. Whereas if you do it very calculated and you keep your food very clean, you find that minimum effective dose and clean your body out, get your focus on health, then you can still pack on a lot of mass, recomp the mass that you had early in the prep, and set yourself up to be prepared to go into that next competition fully restored, fully healthy, and ready to rock. So again, it's like Justin Harris, one of the legend bodybuilding coaches of all time, who I was fortunate enough to have on my show. He says the same thing that I have always said, that every coach always said: diet is the biggest lever you can pull. Hands down. It's the biggest lever. Most pros train roughly the same. Most pros, they do their cardio. Most pros focus on getting the recovery and the sleep. They're all doing roughly the same damn anabolics. That we've been doing the same shit for the last 60 years. The only difference now is some of these, exotic peptides that are coming into the mix, which I've done zero. And what separates the champions from the non-champions is how they structure their diet, and the word nobody wants to hear, their genetics. I mean, you have to have that genetic foundation. So, yeah, I mean, it's silly to think that a lot of people, every pro bodybuilder is taking steroids. They are. Your favorite Marvel actor is taking steroids. Your favorite NFL linebacker is taking steroids. You know, that 155-pound rolling toothpick Tour de France cyclist is taking shit that would make your head spin. You know, I mean, so, you know, if people want to attack me and say, oh, you're cheating, what am I cheating at? I'm not doing
against.
Everything's the playing field is level, and I'm not doing anything in a tested competition where it's taboo. You know, I'm doing probably less than most of the guys I'm standing on stage with me having the understanding that when I'm in prep, everything has to be done to the greatest, highest level that I can possibly push myself. And at the end of the day, if a guy next to me beats me, well, then that guy was just better than I am. I couldn't have dieted any harder. I couldn't have trained any harder. I couldn't have got any more sleep and recovery. I couldn't have been any more intelligent with my approach. And if it pays off for me, then great. And if it doesn't, well, that son of a bitch is just a genetic freak and he's just better than I am. And I'll take that. At the end of the day, I'll take that.
Yeah, it's funny you saying this because what you're saying just then. It's not what I hear when I'm like listening to podcasts, like other people.
Yeah.
It's not the reality of what I hear most people doing. But what you're doing is, I think I may have seen what you've done or been doing somewhere written down. But what I've read, we're on about the same dosages. The only difference I'd probably say is I don't never liked it, the equipoise for anyone that's wondering. But I do get on well with 19 NOR compounds. I do very well on those. People will probably mishear that and think, oh, Jonathan's on 500 milligrams of Tren. No, it's about 100 or less, guys. I mean, it's not, you know, but I can sleep on that. I feel good. I feel strong. It gives me the anti-catabolic benefit. Now, you know, if I was to then do 200, I don't think I'd get a better body for it. I think I'd be more inflamed, not sleep very well, hot, sweaty. When you're running clenbuterol, as you sort of said, your heart rate's already a bit higher anyway. You don't want to be sweating at night. If you can't recover. Your digestion goes to crap. So for me, I mean, you're obviously probably more conservative given that you've got children. I think you said 50 plus. So you're not going to be like some people who are maybe 20 years old. I mean, I'm 30, but 20 years old out there, who I hear down my local gym. I wasn't sure what to do, so I bought a RIP blend, and I've been doing 1 ml a day. And again, what a RIP blend is 50 milligrams of each testosterone times that by 7. So you're doing something like 350 milligrams of each per day. You're on a gram of AAS per week. Then you're also stacking on 100 milligrams of anadrol and the human growth hormone they can afford. And I'm thinking, there's no individuality to that because you're just using a template formula. I'm sure, Rob, you're probably the same as me. You have your testosterone at level which does the job. You have your Masteron or whatever EQ, that does the job. And you might add in an oral, that does the job. But you don't need to add more. If your strength's actually creeping up through prep, like mine does, I don't need to add in 50 milligrams of Winstrol if 25 milligrams of Anavar does the job. I don't need to add it in every day. Keep training 3 or 4 times a week. It's very much as per requirement, as per needed basis. I appreciate you sort of sharing that because I probably wouldn't explain it so carefully. But I believe you. I don't think you're telling a lie. That's coming from me.
Well, the one thing you reminded me of, and maybe it's a funny story to you, but you'd mentioned Masteron. So I would, deep into the cut, I would switch from EQ to Masteron and replace the EQ until it all ran out. You may know that at least over here, there's a massive shortage of it, and it's also almost impossible to get. So I had a small amount that I used just in the final weeks, probably the last 4 weeks. So I pulled off the EQ and went to the Masteron, but that was the only other change that I made.
Fair enough. Yeah.
And that's just for hardening. You know, that's what that is. It just really hardens you up. If you're already very lean and you add that Masteron in, it's just going to give you that nice, dense, hard, granite-like appearance. But at the end of the day, it's like anybody would tell you, you know, taking Masteron, taking Winstrol, something like that, you're just wasting your time if you're not already freaking peeled. You know, you're not even going to notice the effect if you're not already shredded. So again, diet's the biggest lever you can pull.
Absolutely, yeah. And the sort of jumps I make throughout my sort of contest preps, I'm talking like 15 grams extra per week. And that's not every week. So say my strength's at this level starts to go down a bit. Was it because I wasn't sleeping well? Was it because I was up too late last night? You know, you sort of run these sort of things through your head. Is it just me being a bit of an arsehole, basically not looking after myself? Or is it my strength starting to drop because my muscle size is dropping, sort of thing, vice versa? In which case, okay, it's efficacious to add 50 milligrams of whatever. That's pretty much how I've done it. And largely speaking, I've never actually needed to go above about a gram per week. So for anyone that's wondering,
yeah,
Jonathan,
same.
less than a gram per week. There we go.
Yeah, that I'm the same way. That's about where I am at its peak. That's as high as I would go, because I found that to work very well for me. And then when you're, you know, really paying attention to your physique, you know, when you're 4 weeks out and your pumps are absolutely off the charts, you know, you look ridiculous, veins everywhere, striations, you know, in your shoulders and chest, and everything is looking peeled. There's no reason to change. There's no reason to add anything. You know that everything is clicking on all cylinders, and I'm feeding the muscle the required amount that it needs to keep that strength and fullness and output in the gym. You know, just keep doing what you're doing. I mean, if you get into your peak week and you have to incorporate a bunch of voodoo and horse shit to get you ready for stage, then you just didn't come in lean enough. You know, I tell everybody, just be fat-free. John Meadows said that years ago. It is the most perfect, poignant, simple statement anybody ever made. He said, when you come into peak week, just be fat-free. And if you're super freaking peeled, very little needs to be done. There's just a little bit of, you know, you want to come in flat, but then you want to have that ability to just inflate it with just a little bit of extra food at the end, or front load the carbs or whatever, and then find that look, hold the look, and then you're ready to rock. And even on the day of the show, you shouldn't be eating a lot of food. I mean, you should be able to wake up on Saturday morning or whatever day the show is and technically just be able to nibble on a little bit of food, because the look should be there. And you should be full from the load the night before. And that's where a lot of people make mistakes also, is they'll load the night before way too much, or they don't know what they're doing. They wake up the day of the show, they don't like the look, so they overdo the food or whatever, and then it spills over, they get watery, and it just falls apart. So just come into that final week super peeled, and very little needs to be done.
Yeah, be ready early is I think the thing really. And like my show day feeding, I don't even meals or show. I literally have a patty built on, like dried beef jerky sort of thing. Very fatty, thick fat cut on it. Like a tub or a box of butter, dip the beef in the butter, eat a few bits, just enough to sort of, you know, give a bit of hydration sort of thing. Just sips of water throughout the day, never gulping water, because, you know, gulp water you can't digest well. You're bloated. So that's pretty much it. There's nothing magical with carnivore refeed day, and people always ask about like the refeed day as if it's like it's the make or break thing. It's like you said, John Medley said, you know, get peeled, see what happens, and you're probably not going to mess it up too much. It's when people start to change and deplete and add this and sit in saunas for, I don't know, 2 hours. That's when things start to go wrong.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
Do you leave it there then, do you think, or we can cover everything we need to?
Yeah. Hey, I'm happy if you're happy.
We've answered.
Yeah, I can't even see the questions. They're so small. So.
Yeah, it's not ideal, this application, but don't know. But what I'll do is I'll ask the audience now. So if you guys have enjoyed this, let us know in our chat. leave Rob a message, like a group thing on the Facebook page as well. So get this Facebook page group forum, which is Carnivore Bodybuilding. Also go to his website as well for any inquiry. So I believe it's at robgoodwinfitness.com or something.
Yep. That works.
Brilliant. That works. Yeah. So approach you with us, and we'll answer some more questions. And if there's much response, we'll do this as a regular thing. And hopefully,
I'd love
you guys
to.
out
Yeah.
of it. And yeah, I think it'd be useful.
Absolutely. I've enjoyed every minute of it.
Me too. Nice one. All right, I'll leave it there, guys. I'm going to use this laptop to turn it all off. It works. If I can, I don't know. No, it's not going to work. All right. Take care, guys. See you soon.
Thank you.